Thank you to Banshee Beat for that incredible theme song, and apologies for not mentioning that on previous episodes. My name is Brett Arnold, and I'm the host of this here podcast. It's called Roger and Me, and it is an appreciation of the late, great Roger Ebert, keeping his unique spirit of film criticism alive every Tuesday through rewatching his seminal program and talking about the movies they're in, and every Friday by talking about all the new releases in the format that he, inspired or not inspired. He's pioneered. That's the right word. I am here with a dear friend and a film critic in New York City, an entertainment writer. He is the current chairperson of the New York Film Critics Circle. Jordan Hoffman is here.
Hey.
Thank you so much. That is applause from everyone who's watching in the
studio
rafters.
Audience.
Yes.
Hey man, it's great to see you.
Great to see you too. Happy you're here.
Yeah.
Back pre-COVID, this is something that I would have made you come to my house for.
I know. I have podcasted with you on your couch before, and there was a group. I forget the amount of people, but there was one too many people than you had microphones. So we had to it was handing the conch around from Lord of the Flies. They had to hand the mic around, and somebody would wait. I have a blistering insight I must give. Hand me the mic. I must chime in.
I feel like it was probably Emma or Charles, and maybe both of them.
Emma was definitely there, and I think a bunch of knuckleheads were there. It was a good time.
If you want to listen to what that is, check out the New Flesh podcast, my other podcast, which is about horror movies. But this here podcast is about Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel and all the other co-hosts over the years. Of Roger, who co-hosted the show with Roger. Jordan, are you someone who would consider yourself a big fan of Roger? Would you say you were inspired by Roger?
I don't want to front. I mean, I have tremendous respect for him, but I was never an acolyte to the degree that many people are. I mean, some of my friends really, they're his, Roger Ebert specifically, guided them in life.
I'm gonna need their names and numbers.
Yeah. So I am not to that degree, but I watched the show. I mean, I'm a little older than you. I'm significantly older than you are, and I'm older than probably some of the guests you're gonna have lined up. So I was around when the show was in its early days, and I did like it a lot. Because I was just really into knowing what the new movies were coming out. It was a big deal. Information about new movies was difficult to get, and clips. You couldn't just watch a trailer on demand back then. Imagine a pre-YouTube time,
Yeah, I remember when going to apple.com/quicktime/trailers was a very exciting thing. And that was late 90s, early 2000s. And that was revolutionary.
It was a different period. So to see clips of, whatever a new movie that you were excited about. So I definitely watched at the movies and whatever version it was called, sneak previews. There also was another, I mean, I don't mean to, and I did recognize that Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel also were truly inspiring intellectual fellas.
Yes.
Ebert had a little bit of a sleaze streak that, I secretly responded to well, but this guy likes anything with boobs. This guy likes,
the Russ Meyer stuff.
Yeah. The whole streak of his life was evident. And Siskel also, he was you could tell he was a great intellectual, in a previous life, he was at a salon, Siskel, and Siskel, I remember Siskel always praising a script for being smart. That was his key word. And he had that thick Midwest accent, which you as an Illinois native do not have. But he really sounded like he was from the Midwest, and he would always say, but Roger, it's so smart. He'd always say something was smart. And I remember kind of making fun of Siskel for always saying the word smart. It's smart, Roger. So that was a kick. But, it's funny, kind of lost in the footnotes of time. The program that Siskel and Ebert created was so easily, you could steal from it. And there were copycats. And so there was a copycat show that I'm so embarrassed to say this, but I probably watched it just as much as the other one when I was a kid. and it was like a local to New York version, short-lived, with Jeffrey Lyons, who's still around. He's a bit of a bozo.
And Neil Gabler?
I think it was Michael Medved.
Oh, yeah, that's Michael. Okay, I actually have notes on this if you want the history.
I'm curious. I mean, it's in like my head, but like the thing is, like when I wanted to watch two dudes give a yes or no on a movie, and they didn't do thumbs up, thumbs down. They did like yes or no. Like to me, I was a kid, mind you. To me, Siskel and Ebert, which is now revered as this like halcyon thing. I mean, hence you doing this podcast. And to me, Siskel and Ebert was just as okay as Medved and Lyons. Like it was Pepsi Coke, you know, like just one or the other. And in retrospect, I'm like, those two guys were schmoes, you know, like Jeffrey Lyons is still around. I mean, I don't know too much about Medved, but you know, Jeffrey Lyons
yeah, Jeffrey Lyons is still around. I have not heard Michael Medved's name until reading these notes today. But those shows weren't just copycats. They were like Ebert and Roper or Ebert and Siskel, you know, left PBS, do the show elsewhere, and then they took it over.
I see. I didn't know that. You know, Jeffrey Lyons' father was like a big deal in like radio. Like if you watch Sweet Smell of Success, like that's Jeffrey Lyons' father's world. I forget his name, you know, Milton Lyons. And, you know, he had a radio show called The Lion's Den, which was like,
if your name is Lion, you gotta have a radio show.
It's like Woody Allen Radio Days type like gossip show. And then Jeffrey Lyons, who's probably now he's got to be in his late 70s, early 80s. And Jeffrey Lyons' kid, Ben Lyons, later inherited the reboot of Siskel and Ebert with Ben Mankiewicz.
That's right.
And Ben Lyons, and Ben Lyons, whom I've met, he's a nice enough chap. I don't know him too well. You know, I think he's an LA dude, and he, you know, he's still in the mix. So like, it's 3 generations of people yapping about entertainment news and whatnot. But anyhow, that's just sort of my embarrassing things. I didn't. You know, I did have the big Ebert book. There was, you know, the very famous one. I don't think I had the first edition. Maybe I had the 3rd edition, but I had it. And
like,
you know,
the big guide of
the big guide, you know, the big, like thousands of reviews. And I would let that inform me before trips to Blockbuster for sure. Like, you know, when I was getting into older movies from the 70s, you know, like, you know, I would watch one Martin Scorsese movie and I would try to find out what are the other ones. So you'd look under S in the index and be like, oh, okay, Mean Streets. This is a biggie. You know, I got to find this they have it in the back of the Blockbuster. Okay, yeah, I'll rent Mean Streets because Roger Ebert said it was 4 stars. So
it's like, we don't know how easy we have it with our IMDb app.
Oh my God, yeah. Well, that was the same thing with records too. Like, you'd get a big book, and like Sam Goody's would have, you'd get into a new band. You'd get into the band Yes, as I would. And you know, Yes had 7,000 albums and all kinds of solo projects. And you'd be like, well, they're
different arrangements of the band.
Exactly. So you'd look under Yes in the big book and you'd find out all the solo albums. It'd be like Chris Squire's Fish Out of Water. Oh, that's a special order. So that's my walk with Roger Ebert. I respect the dude. You know, I never met him, weirdly enough. I was just getting it. I mean, I've been in this biz for a while, and by the time I was like going to festivals, he was already sick. Yes. And I think there was one Sundance when I was there and he was there, but we were never in the same room together. And then by the next Sundance, he was too sick to travel, and then he passed away. So I never met him, but maybe I tweeted at him once or twice. You know?
Oh, I certainly probably annoyed him on Twitter. I can't imagine. I'm definitely, all those tweets have been purged. I cannot find them anymore. But I went to the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana, which means I attended Ebert Fest for 4 years.
Right.
And he was alive for the first 2 out of the 4 that I went to. And so I was in the same room with him. I think I even shook his hand once, but he was not, you know, speaking.
He wasn't speaking at that point.
He was not speaking.
Hey, you know, great segue. If unless I'm mistaken, wasn't one of the 2 movies we're talking about today at the first Ebert Fest?
Was it the Wall?
Yeah.
Yes, The Wall. In my research, I just pulled up. It was in fact included at Ebert Fest. Based on the structure of the episode, unfortunately, they don't talk about Pink Floyd's The Wall until midway through the episode.
Oh, okay.
So,
all right.
I wish I wish that worked out better.
All right,
but it's still delightful. No. We don't cut anything here. Who are we kidding? So that's great to hear your personal relationship with Ebert. I love that you knew the guys who took over the show. So I'll give you a brief history of that situation before we go into the episode.
Yeah.
So this iteration we're about to watch is the first iteration that's called actually At the Movies. There have been several afterwards. This one's called At the Movies. It is also known as At the Movies with Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert. This particular iteration aired from 1982 to 1990 and was produced by Tribune Entertainment, which was a subsidiary of the Chicago Tribune, which is where Gene Siskel wrote. And the show was, of course, created by Gene and Roger when they left their show Sneak Previews, which they began on Chicago's PBS station WTTW in 1975. So for this show, Siskel and Ebert adapted the same format. They'd used in Sneak Previews 2 critics from opposing newspapers view clips from the week's new movies, discuss them, then pass judgment, expressed in thumbs up or thumbs down. During this run, they would adopt several elements that would make the show lively, including bringing on an animal called Spot the Wonder Dog to help lead into a segment called The Dog of the Week, covering the week's worst movie. And later, which they actually did on this episode, I'm delighted to tell you, they used another animal called Aroma the Educated Skunk to talk about the stinker of the week.
Awesome.
They would also occasionally do an X-ray segment in which they discuss current trends happening in the movies. But none of those features were carried over when Siskel and Ebert left the Tribune in 86 over a contract dispute and created Siskel and Ebert in the Movies with Buena Vista, whose title was later shortened to just Siskel and Ebert. And the show readopted the At the Movies portion of the title in 2007. So complicated. There are so many titles.
Got it. Yeah.
They were that's not pertinent for now. I'll save all the rest of that for next week. But after 2 seasons, I want to get to the guys you mentioned. After 2 seasons, a successful series was retitled Sneak Previews. So that's to say that last week, with the first episode we watched, was in 1975 in November. And that episode was titled Opening Soon at a Theater Near You. And that was developed from an idea credited to producer Thea Flom of PBS affiliate WTTW. It was broadcast once a month to a local audience beginning in September 75. They did the same format. On those not so rare occasions when the two disagreed, sparks might fly, which delighted the viewers. After 2 seasons, a successful series was retitled Sneak Previews and appeared bi-weekly on the PBS network. By its 4th season, the show became a once-a-week feature on 190 to 200 outlets and achieved status as the highest-rated weekly entertainment series in the history of public broadcasting.
Hey.
But based on their success in 1980, WTTW made plans to remove the show from PBS and sell it commercially as a WTTW production. The 2 stars indicated they were offered a take it or leave it contract, which they declined. So they left the show in 1981 and launched At the Movies for commercial television under the banner of Tribune Entertainment.
So the original producers were going to try to sell it.
Yeah.
And they were going to cut a deal. And they're like, screw you. We don't need you. We'll just do it on our own.
Yes. And history proved them correct. But that situation rarely works out for the talent, I feel.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
They left the series in 81 to launch At the Movies for commercial television under the banner of Tribune Entertainment, a syndication arm of the Chicago Tribune, basically utilizing the same format. As I mentioned, they brought on the dog and the skunk. At WTTW, Sneak Previews replaced Siskel and Ebert with New York-based critics Jeff Lyons and Neil Gabler. In time, the PBS offering would settle on Lyons and Michael Medved as its host, and the show remained on the air through 1995, 1996.
All right, so to my embarrassment, I'm so embarrassed. That was the show I watched more as a kid, like as a young lad.
It's okay.
Maybe it was just the timing.
I was local to Chicago, so to me, I said this the first episode, I assumed it was a local thing that I was like privy to. Right. I didn't realize it was this national phenomenon.
When I got older, I clearly recognized that Siskel and Ebert were the finer of the two. And then, of course, Siskel and Ebert got famous. They would go on the Letterman show.
They would be on
hilarious.
The Critic.
Well, there was the Critic for sure. And they would also go on the Howard Stern show a lot. Oh, yeah. And they were very funny. So when I was quite young is when I was more of a Lions Medved stan. And then
I love
when
the
I
idea of you
teen,
going around like saying Medved quotes to people, and everyone's like, "Huh?"
Yeah, I mean, I will honestly say, like, I think when I first encountered Siskel and Ebert, I was like, these two jokers are ripping off Medved and Lions, like those are my boys. But then when I became a teen, my affiliation with Medved and Lions ended. And Jeffrey Lyons, he might still be on some kind of wacko television station today, some very obscure, New York 1.5 show. He's still around. Anyway, so I'm glad you filled me in because I never quite, I never did the research on this. And so now I know.
Look, the show has value. I'm proving it, right? I'm proving it live. So this episode we're about to watch is At the Movies, episode 101, produced by the Tribune Company. So it's the context, as you just got, is right after they were told, hey, we're going to sell the show. You guys in? And they said, no, we'll do it ourselves. So they did that. And let's watch together. And it kind of turned into an MST3K situation where we just kind of, if you feel like chiming in while we're watching, feel free.
I'll chime, I'm sure.
All right, here we go. Oh, this intro's wonderful.
There he is. Ebert's name is first in the alphabet, but I guess since it was a Tribune show, Siskel was the homeboy. He got top billing.
This is something Jason talked about last week, too. Apparently it was a sore spot for him, but I read today that they flipped a coin later on for the Siskel and Ebert actual name show. So
all right.
Not sure how true that is, but I love him getting a reporter's notebook from the vending machine.
Yeah, it's cute. That's the same kind of notebook that I use in screenings.
The long one that fits in your back pocket, right?
Yeah, and I write it down and I can't. Oh, yeah. Rocking out.
Yeah. Apologies for the sound on this episode. This one, unlike all the other bootlegs, it's only coming out of one ear. I don't know if you hear that too, everybody.
Oh, okay.
But apologies.
But I hear that funky Nick Mason beat.
Yeah, dude.
Sick hi-hat.
That's the central image in the wall, a pictorialization of the Pink Floyd song. And one of 4 new movies we'll be reviewing this week on At the Movies, the movie review program. Joining me in the balcony is Roger Ebert, film critic of the Chicago Times.
And here with me at the movies is Gene Siskel, film critic of the Chicago Tribune. Well, in addition to Pink Floyd, we'll also be looking at movies about 3 other strange varieties of punks. We'll see Class of 1984, about a high school ruled by violence. Lola, one of the last films by West Germany's Rainer Werner Fassbinder. And now Gene starts with a film about a hard-boiled London gangster.
The movie is called A Long Good Friday, a new English film that introduces us to one of the most unforgettable gangsters you'll ever meet. That's Harold Shand, who's got his fingers in all sorts of pies, trying, as the film opens, to put together a big real estate deal with some Americans. To show his clout, Harold takes the visiting Americans to lunch at his fancy English pub.
Oh, that shouldn't show the scene. Gives too much away.
I know. So here's the note I have from the first episode is we were noticing how many clips they show and how it's absurd for like a 22-minute or 30-minute show. How much of it is them showing clips? Not only do they show a clip here, they're going to show a second clip from The Long Good Friday. So I'm going to skip ahead to the commentary if nobody minds.
And so there you have it. The confident Harold, the blustering Harold, begins to crack. Someone is trying to embarrass him, blow him away, and he doesn't know who it can be. There are more assaults on Harold and his associates. This film positively is riveting as we watch a bully begin to sweat. But Harold doesn't give up easily, and like so many detectives in other mystery stories, Harold begins rounding up the usual suspects.
Another clip?
Oh, this is another great scene.
I know. I can't believe they showed it.
But this is a good. This is a good one to sell it. That. Oi, you lot! Hang it upside down in the meat cooler. Bob Hoskins rules in this movie.
He does. He does rule in this movie.
You will not forget Harold Shand. That's the ultimate pleasure of The Long Good Friday. His thick English accent takes a while to understand. I missed a few lines at the beginning. But his stiff pride, his bullying, and his newfound fear through this picture are immediately recognizable. Bob Hoskins plays Harold Shand. And this is the kind of performance that
Bob
wins awards,
Oskins.
lots of awards.
This is one of the best films I've seen in a long time. I agree with you about Hoskins. I agree, too, and I'm glad you said the accent's a little thick sometimes.
I-
The one word that American viewers are going to have to pick up on is the word grass, which means informer. And unless you know that, you're going to miss a lot of this movie. But
Yeah, I didn't know that.
It's a great
but I
film.
figured it out.
We went through all kinds of films about gangsters. We've had great melodramas and films like The Godfather and all that, where they're sort of stylized figure. This guy looks like he could really exist. It's that he's not particularly good looking. He sort of feels trapped in that suit every time.
What a
I see him. I
diss.
kept thinking of a bulldog in that suit. But this guy, you just watch. Maybe there are guys like this.
And at the end, as evil as he is, you really sympathize with him. In the last shot, he's looking back and forth, his eyes shifting back and forth.
Give it away the ending.
Good
Jesus.
Okay,
Class of 84.
we're gonna pause here
All right,
and discuss The Long Good Friday,
Yeah.
a movie that, you know, Roger and Gene's takes, I would say, have aged very well. Everybody loves this movie. They
Yeah.
clocked it right away.
Yeah.
Ebert said it's one of the best movies he's seen of the year or in years.
Yeah.
I unfortunately
Oh no.
watched it for the first time today
Oh no.
and did not connect with it.
Oh no.
And I love movies from this era, and I love Bob Oskins,
Yeah.
and I love that a young Helen Mirren is in this,
Yeah.
and I love that a very young Pierce Brosnan is in this.
And basically naked Pierce Brosnan.
Yeah. This movie I found to be confounding for one. Like, yes, the accent thing is a problem, and I couldn't find the version with subtitles when I was watching it. And I just, it definitely comes together eventually, and I appreciated the ending as well. Like, I do think it ends in a very compelling way, but I just I couldn't get into this movie, and I would love to talk to you about what you saw in it, because I don't think you'd ever seen it either.
No, well, it's funny because you mentioned this, a couple days ago, Long Good Friday. I'm like, oh yeah, of course I've seen Long Good Friday, and I was thinking about it, and I hadn't. I'd seen Mona Lisa, which also has Bob Hoskins and has underworld elements in it.
Yes.
Great movie.
Great movie.
So I dialed up Long Good Friday today on Home Box Office Maximum, and I did put on the titles because the subtitles. Because I was about 5 minutes in being like, I can't understand what the hell these English people are saying.
Yeah,
so
that factored in.
I watched it with the subtitles. I really dug it. Now, the truth is, for a good 40 minutes, you have no idea what the hell is going on.
Yeah.
You kind of need
confounding.
You need to give it your full attention. So if you were like kind of thinking of other things, even you're watching at home, maybe you got some people were texting you. If you were not in the zone, this is one that's going to maybe slip by you. But what I ultimately connected to, and I think Gene Siskel, pointed out, it's kind of like, it's very Shakespearean, I found, because it's about a guy, it's a king. Bob Hoskins is a king, and his kingdom is crumbling from within, and he doesn't understand how, and he's in the middle of a very important deal. The Americans are coming, and he's trying to set up some redevelopment thing along the docks right on the Thames.
He's like a gangster trying almost to like go straight, but he's trying to make like a deal that's like a real proper deal.
He's like a Trump guy or one of these or a Kushner type. So and it's what's his name, Eddie Constantine, who played Lemmy Caution in Alphaville as the American, and he looks just like Joe Piscopo looks today. He was probably, I don't know how, this movie's 40 some odd years old. So but what's, I think, so it really worked for me on like that kind of grand Shakespearean level of just like, it mostly takes place on one day, on Good Friday, and everything's falling apart. And then the other thing is, I bet it really means a lot to British people because it's Britain at a very specific time. They're trying to become an international player. There's all this stuff about like, they're, they want to reconnect. They want to be the capital of Europe, but it's kind of like, the Americans, like, you guys are more messed up than the Cubans. It's like depressed England. Yeah. And there's this scene when they're on the waterfront and they're like, one day this will all be developed and we're going to have the Olympics here. And it all came true. I mean, that's what's amazing is that like these mobsters are like, one day this area, which is just like a slop house, just like a gross, depressed, no development at all, except for the Tower Bridge, is going to be tourists and for millionaires. And we'll make billions out of this. And at the time, probably a lot of English people were like, get real. Like, are you joking? That's like shooting a movie in Newark, New Jersey and saying one day we'll make billions here in Newark. And, anybody knows
also
Newark
true.
Well, no, Newark's been a mess for 50 years. Jersey City's been all right. But but it all kind of came true. So it's kind of funny to watch it now. I just kind of like the look of it. It had good, good grain, shot at that time period. And
it was shot in it was supposed to come out in 1979. It was
completed it was shot in 79. It was held up. I did very cursory research, and it was held up by legal matters, and ultimately it was George Harrison's company, Handmade Films, that swooped in at the end and rescued the movie. And now it's considered a classic, particularly in England. Another example.
It's on the British Film Institute top 100 list. It's number 21.
21, really.
Fuck me is the point.
Well, no. I mean, listen, I think, listen, the first time you watch The Godfather, it's confusing. Who's
You're
Barzini?
right. Yeah.
What are they talking about?
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, the specifics of The Godfather can be perplexing if you don't know what the hell's going on. And I could see this movie connecting with British people the way the French Connection connects with New Yorkers. It's very much of that time. And just like a very specific look and feel. And Bob Hoskins is so cool.
Yeah, because go ahead.
He's a bad guy.
Yeah,
but he's such like a nice guy. Like early on, one of his close buddies who's gay, which is like weird. Like you wouldn't think of The Sopranos when they find out one of their guys is gay, they kill him, right?
Yeah.
And then this is like we knew he liked to bugger people, but it never went that far. It's like that's kind of like let's examine that. That's unusual.
Yeah.
At least I was surprised by that. So one of his buddies early on, who's the gay guy, he gets killed. And he's like, we was mates from the beginning. Like he's all torn up, it's a really good performance. And then later some violence breaks out kind of unexpectedly. And he's really shook by it. And, part of it is like, he keeps saying there's been peace and quiet for 10 years. He's been a good crime lord. There's not much trouble. And when he's putting the screws to his people, because he's trying to figure out what's going on, they're all like, why would we rock the boat? Everything's going great. Yeah. East End and North London finally together. And of course the twist, it's all the rotten Irish. It's very anti-IRA film. It's kind of anti-Irish. Yes. I don't know if it's anti-Irish or not, or it's just honest.
I think it's a little bit of the IRA, but I mean, it's definitely there.
I don't know that the movie is anti-Irish, but the character is like, oi, the mix, There's a little bit of anti-black race, and there's like one line is like, oi, the spades. It's like, fuck them, it's like, and that's it. Well, it's not
of the time.
He's not a Bob Hoskins's character is not a role model, or anything like that. But it's a fascinating performance.
Even someone who I didn't connect with this movie very well. He's undeniably incredible in this movie, and then he would go on to be absolutely incredible in hundreds of other movies, and a lot of performances similar to this. And Luc Besson's Unleashed, is that I love that Bob Hoskins performance.
Is Bob Hoskins still with us? Is he still around?
Bob Hoskins is still with us, as far as I know. Yeah,
that's
Bob Hoskins. Nope.
He died.
Wait a minute. Yeah. God, let me give us a clean edit.
All right, I'll
nope.
ask it. Is he?
He's go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
When did Bob Hoskins die? When did he die?
Bob Hoskins died in April of 2014.
Oh, that's too bad.
Illness and death. He was diagnosed with Parkinson's in 2011. Retired from acting in 2012. Died of pneumonia, age 71 in April 2014.
So I'm looking at the director of this movie. He's born in Scotland. His name is John Mackenzie, and he's done a lot of British television, and he's made a lot of movies, and some of them I've
not a lot of movies I've seen. Yeah,
a lot of movies that have slipped through the cracks for me. Like one of them is very famous, The Fourth Protocol. That was a big hit in the late 80s, and that had Pierce Brosnan in it and Michael Caine, and it's based on a Frederick Forsyth spy novel, and I bet you I would like that. I never saw it. I did see he made in 1992 the movie about Jack Ruby with Danny Aiello as Jack Ruby, which I did see. I don't have too many memories about it, but I did see that.
Wow, yeah, Sherilyn Fenn and Tobin Bell. What a cast for 1992's Ruby.
You know what I remember about Ruby? I remember I was still a young lad in 1992.
A year after I was born, 1992.
Oh my God, yeah.
Ruby came
I
out.
believe Ruby played. I was in high school, and I was working at the movie theater, and we had it at our theater, so I would see everything at our theater. And Ruby was one of the first movies that I was able to watch and say, "Gee, this is a low budget movie." Like I was able to see through the normal tricks. You know, prior to that, I wasn't keen. I didn't have a keen enough eye to recognize shortcuts in movies. But Ruby was one of the first ones like, oh, I had like $12 on this movie. This is kind of cheap. I still kind of liked it, but you know, I recognized that it was not, wasn't JFK, which had a multi-million-dollar budget. So
right. Well, The Long Good Friday is on HBO Max. It's on the Criterion channel. And obviously, what do I know? This is a movie where I just logged it on Letterboxd, and I've got like vitriol immediately from someone who was like, this movie's a masterpiece and everybody knows it. One more lunk-headed take and I'm unfollowing. Like, go ahead, unfollow.
Yeah, unfollow. Listen,
there declare you're unfollowing.
Plenty of movies that people love, I don't like.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
You know. But
like, I just usually like movies exactly like this. Like The Friends of Eddie Coyle is a good example of one that's similar that I really love. I just never connected with it. I'm open to the possibility that I should, watch it again, knowing what it's about, and it would, mean a lot more to me. But I found it quite boring, and I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Ask me about Drive My Car, which every critic in America did backflips over last year.
I will not, because that was a delightful 3 hours, Jordan.
Did you like Drive My Car?
I did like Drive My Car.
All right.
I did.
I liked the nap I got during.
I drove that red Saab growing up, so maybe that helped.
I just like to bring that up. I just like to bring that movie up with people sometimes.
Yeah, it's definitely divisive. It's I wouldn't recommend.
No, it's not divisive. People love it. Everybody says they love it.
Yeah, but I mean, like, critic audience divide. Like, I wouldn't.
Oh, like normal people don't.
Yeah, normal people.
Like human beings recognize it as a snooze. If I want to, hey, did they know they had the camera running while they were rehearsing the play? I'm still convinced that was an accident. I'm like, oh shit, we should just throw this in the movie.
It should have been a DVD bonus content, but it's in the movie.
Yeah, they were rehearsing the play. They left the camera on. Next thing you know, the movie's an hour longer. For this, he wins awards.
I love that. I'm sifting through Roger's 4-star review of The Long Good Friday contemporary from the year it came out.
Yeah.
I'm trying to see if there's anything good to pull out or if I should just read it. He calls it a masterful and very tough piece of filmmaking. He said the point of the film isn't to analyze Harold Chan's problems, it's to present a portrait of this man. And I've rarely seen a movie character so completely alive. Harold Chan is an evil, cruel, sadistic man, but he's a mass of contradictions, and there are times when we understand him so completely we almost feel affection. He's such a character, such an overcompensating cockney, sensitive to the slightest affront, able to strike fear in the hearts of killers, but a pushover when his mistress raises his voice at him. Shand is played by a compact, muscular actor named Bob Oskins in the most praised film performance of the year from England. Hoskins has the energy and freshness of a younger Michael Caine. If not the good looks. There are another
diss.
First Gene ragged on him, and now Roger got a jab in.
Yeah.
There are scenes where he hangs his enemies upside down for meat hooks, spoiler alert, and questions them about the bombings, and other scenes moments later where he solemnly kids with the neighborhood juvenile delinquents and tries to soft talk the Americans out of his millions.
That was the best part. That there's this one part where they're trying to get info out of one of his associates, and he's nude. The dude is nude, and the other guy's got like a long kitchen knife, and he like hits him with he doesn't stab him, he like hits them with the sharp edge of the knife on his butt, and he's bleeding out of his butt, and then he hits him on the legs. He's like, oh, I don't fucking know who lit the bombs, I don't know. And he's like, you're like, holy shit, Bob Hoskins is rough, he's really rough. And they go outside, and they're like these kids, but they're like junior thieves, and they're like, we were just watching your car, now you gotta pay us. And he's like, look at these lads, they're the future of this country, here's your $5, Bob. It's like this adorable scene of like little, and I'm like, this is fucked up, this is terrible. It's
but good cinema. It's good cinema.
It's such a good scene. Yeah.
He's an operator. He's a con man who has muscled his way to the top by knowing exactly how things work and what buttons to push. And now here he is, impotent before this faceless enemy. The Long Good Friday tells a story in a rather indirect way, opening with a montage of seemingly unrelated events held together by a hypnotic music theme. Haven't discussed the fucking score, which is killer. I loved it, but you seem like you did not.
Well, it's a lot.
It's overbearing.
It's intense. I mean, maybe what Ebert says is true, because the first, like I mentioned, the first 40 minutes of the movie are like, I have no idea what's happening. Am I dumb? Why don't I understand? And there's really no glue. So maybe that's why this heavy duty score. Yeah. And then it comes together at the end. I mean, you had to have loved the last 15 minutes.
I did. I undeniably did.
The last 15 minutes are great.
Ebert says this: everything is eventually explained. It's all a big misunderstanding based on stupid decisions taken by Chan's underlings and misinterpreted by the IRA. But although we know the real story and Harold Chan does, the IRA never does. And the movie's final shots are quite simply extraordinary. Close-ups held for a long time of Chan's rat-like face. In close-up as his eyes shift from side to side and his mouth breaks into a terrified grin, and he realizes how it feels to get a dose of his own medicine. The movie is one amazing piece of work, not only for the Hoskins performance, but also for the energy of the filmmaking, the power of the music, and oddly enough, for the engaging quality of the sometimes very violent sense of humor. Can't argue with Roger. I'm going to go ahead and take the L on that one. It's not you, it's me, The Long Good Friday.
All right, I
hope not to alienate listeners with my horrible take on The Long Good Friday, but don't worry, I think my takes on everything else are wonderful. Here we go. Here's more of the episode.
These are the commercials?
Yes. Okay, so hold on.
Look at her. Yeah.
I want to say now that if you want to watch the commercials and the full feed and all that stuff, the Patreon, I'm going to put a compilation at the end, all the commercials, and there's 3 different promos for this episode that they recorded that for some reason I have.
The Class of 1984 is a weird and violent movie that a lot of people think is absolute garbage. I think you do. I think it's a strong, original movie with a lot of style.
I'm with Roger.
The movie stars Perry King as a high school music teacher who gets involved in a war with a gang of punks who terrorize everyone in the school. And the result is a sort of futuristic punk rock blackboard jungle with elements of realism and a lot of anarchistic fantasy all mixed in together. Early in the movie, King introduces himself to his new students.
Are you in this class? In Steg.
That with a lot of...
Hey, the others are guest. My Namen is... Hey, the others are guest.
Van Patten is the...
It's not here. Bye-bye.
That's Timothy Van Patten as the future Hitler there. The movie combines supercharged realism like that with a lot of violence, a lot of rock and roll, and a certain amount of comedy. This is one of my favorite sort of comic scenes. Roddy McDowell plays a teacher who will try anything to make his students study their biology.
I'm showing this scene. It's great.
How many chambers are there in the human heart?
Oh, my God. Look at him.
It's such a good movie, Jordan. I wish you watched it. I know it's hard to watch everything. I'm excited to talk about it on the Patreon, either with you or by myself, depending on time. But I will be talking about it.
Oh, such a tremendous pleasure. Mr. Stegman, what is an amphibian? You should know. We had such a wonderful display hanging on our wall. You don't know.
This may be the first high school movie that teachers can enjoy. I wonder if you get the idea that The Class of 1984 is a good movie. I think it is. It's not junk, although a lot of critics have dismissed it, and Newsweek called this movie The Class of 1982 with herpes. Well, that's not fair. There are so many movies about high schools in revolt and punks in rebellion. They all get lumped together as dead teenager movies and dismissed. But The Class of 1984 is a little different and a little special. This is a movie with style and humor and a lot of raw energy. I liked it.
And I'm sitting here thinking I wish I wrote that Newsweek line, because I really didn't like the movie, Roger, and I'm surprised you did, because very early on we see the teacher with the beard, the good teacher, Perry King, and we see his wife, and we're told right away she's a few months pregnant. And right away I turned to the person I was with and said, she'll be raped in a few scenes, and she was. And then I see Roddy McDowell, affectionately like his pets, in the biology lab. I turned to my companion and said, watch out, all the animals will be skinned.
Okay, so you're prescient. What do you?
Not prescient. That's easy. And a movie that can be described that quickly falls into a pattern that simply is over before it begins.
The movie cannot be described that quickly because all you're doing is limiting it to the plot. This movie is based on style and energy. It's based upon the feeling that it gives us. Of course, a lot of this stuff is predictable, but it's miles better than most high school movies.
That you're not giving it much of a compliment when you say that. I think that this is true. That the people, the punks that they are in this film are more like punk rock musicians than they are real kids. And this film tries and bathes itself with realism. Well, our next film is Lola, made by
what basically happened there was Ebert was 50 years ahead, and he was just like, it's vibes, man. He just said it was vibes.
Yeah,
and Siskel
who cares about plot contrivances?
Yeah, then Siskel was just like, no, this is stupid. This makes no sense. This is predictable. And he's like, no shit, man. It's a dumb movie. You got to roll with it. So
yeah,
I think we just saw a very good example of the clear divide between Siskel and Ebert. Siskel is a more cerebral intellectual, and Ebert, certainly had that element to him too. But he was much more willing to roll with a movie based on vibes than Siskel ever was.
And yeah, this movie is also just like, counterculture. Like, imagine a movie like, what is that movie called? Dangerous Minds, or like any one of those movies where like, someone a teacher comes to like save the inner city kids or the juvenile delinquents. And those movies always end in like a nice feel-goody way.
Yeah.
This one is like a dystopian version of that, where it's like, yeah, the kids are horrifying and they run the school and the teachers can't do anything about it and the cops can't do anything about it and everyone's mortified of them. And then it ends in like a teacher death wish scenario. It's a blast. It's so much fun.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I've never seen it. I've seen Class of Nukem High, but I've never seen Class of 1984, although I certainly had heard of it over the years. I did not know that Roddy McDowall was in it. And he's a teacher who gets so frustrated with his kids.
That scene
he whips out a gun.
Unbelievable. That scene is unbelievable. It's oddly prescient in terms of like, metal detectors in schools and stuff in like the 80s. It's like, that came true somehow. But it's directed by Mark L. Lester, who's directed some stinkers and some bangers. Yeah. He did Commando, which is one of my favorite, 80s Arnold movies.
It has quality.
Firestarter, which is no good. The original.
Well, Firestarter. Firestarter's all right.
It's okay. It's much better than the remake that just came out.
Yeah, I watched Firestarter not long ago, and I kind of like that movie.
It's another one I would just say is like really boring. It's like great showdown at the end.
I like
really
all the flashbacks to like the Institute, like this sort of like vaguely Timothy Leary experiment.
I just read the book after the remake came out, and I rewatched the movie. The book is quite good, so I think it's that the first movie gets it way better than the new one.
What else did this gentleman do over the years?
He did a sequel to Class of 1984 in 1990. Called Class of 1999 that like inverts the premise on its head apparently, and I cannot wait to watch that. Okay. He also directed Armed and Dangerous.
Oh yeah, I saw that
with John Candy and Eugene Levy and Robert Loggia. He directed Showdown in Little Tokyo with what is that? Dolph Lundgren, Brandon Lee.
I may have missed that one.
And Night of the Running Man, which I don't know what that is.
Is that a sequel to The Running Man?
I was looking to see, and I don't think so, but perhaps. A lot of stuff I haven't heard of. Something called Stunts, Extreme Justice, Truck Stop Women. He's done a lot of stuff.
I bet you Ebert liked Truck Stop Women. That sounds like it's right up his alley.
Absolutely. I will be talking more about a Class of 1984 on the Patreon, so subscribe to that for the full discussion.
You got to get into that, man.
You got to get into that, and I will read, of course, Roger's review of it and all that good stuff. Back to the episode.
Werner Fassbinder, who died last June at age 36 after incredibly making more than 35 feature films in his brief life. In Lola, Fassbinder follows the story of the classic German film The Blue Angel, the one with Marlene Dietrich, with an uptight man falling for a loose dance hall singer. In this film, Lola, it is a new efficient building commissioner in a rebuilding Germany in the 1950s who falls for Lola, the singer prostitute. He represents the old efficient Germany. She represents the new anything for a buck Germany. Here they talk in a car. He doesn't realize that she is a prostitute. Fassbinder's films always have a strong visual style. She's always bathed in that hot pink light, he in that cold blue. This is an exceptionally strong film, a battle between their natures. Who will transform the other? Which way is Germany going? Fassbinder's answer is very bleak, but his film is not. It's full of rich characters, lurid colors, and a battle among lost souls who prefer money to human contact.
It's terrific.
It's hard for me to remember a film that made me quite so sad as this one, and yet it's a joy to watch. I think the filmmaking is at a very high level.
You mentioned Fassbinder's stylistic devices, and of course, in every one of his films, the people are rather restrained by the style that they affect and also by the visual style of the film. But in the good films, they seem trapped by those styles and trying to escape from them. In the bad films, and I think this is a bad one, they seem to just occupy the style. It's an exercise in style. I didn't care about these people. The movie was tired. It didn't have any energy. It was a real disappointment, especially coming after Maria Brown, which this is supposed to be the next film in a trilogy.
And I liked Maria Braun, and I also thought that this film had some of the same themes with the people standing for the country and the national character. You know, this is a case where when I hear you say you didn't like the characters and they were tired, I just think these were three exceptional performances.
I don't think I said I didn't like the characters. I said I didn't think that anything happened with the characters.
Testy.
Tremendous things are happening with the characters. We have people crossing paths. We have total change by that efficient guy. There's a lot happening here, and I think what happens is what he's saying about this country, which is the country can't get out of its national character.
I think if you go back and look at Maria Brown starring Hannah Shigula, you'll find a lot more energy than you find in this film. So anyway, next at the
I'll just pause for a moment to say Lola was wonderful. I am not super well versed on Fassbinder. I've seen Ali Fear Eats the Soul, and I think that's it besides this movie. And this movie was so fantastic. I am about to binge all of his 35 other movies. I cannot wait.
One of those is a 19-hour television series. Also.
Okay, maybe I'll take my time on that one.
I have not seen Lola. I have seen. They said that he made 35 movies. I don't know if that's
made 35 movies in a very short amount of time.
Yeah. Well, he was a well-known speed freak, I think. And he also directed a lot of theater, and I think he wrote books of poetry and whatnot. He was an interesting cat. I have not seen Lola, but I've seen a lot of Fassbinder's movies. And so I don't know where I would, if I would go on Siskel's side or Ebert's side, because I am not, I don't always love his stuff. I like some of it and I dislike some of it. You mentioned Ali Fear Eats the Soul. That is an amazing movie.
Great one. Yeah.
I love that movie. Though Ebert and Siskel both
funny.
mentioned.
Those are both, that's like a Douglas Sirk, update, that movie, essentially, I feel like. And this one, that's what I was feeling this whole time, is this movie feels like a Douglas Sirk movie if, he made a movie in the 80s and was really cynical, because it's got all that melodrama and it's warm and it's really nice to look at, but it's a movie about corruption winning out over everything. And it's just so bleak, but it's beautiful.
I will put it on the list. I will say some of the other ones of his that I've really liked. There's one called Fox and His Friends. Yes. Not Fox and Friends, the morning chat
not Trump's favorite television show. No,
Fox and His Friends, which I want to say Fassbinder is the lead. I think he acts in that, and there's it's wild, man. It's a wild movie. He did a lot.
I'm surprised Ebert didn't like it.
Everybody has their. Yeah. But there's another one of his that's beloved called The Bitter Tears of Petra Van Kant, and much like you didn't connect with The Long Good Friday, I watched The Bitter Tears of Petra Van Kant years ago, 20 years ago, when I was getting kind of going through a lot of these movies, and was gobbling a lot of them up and loved a lot of Fassbinder stuff. And that one just put me to sleep. And I even watched it a second time because I'm like, I must have missed something. Didn't really connect with me. But he's done some wild shit. World on a Wire. Is that him?
Yep, it is.
World on a Wire is nuts, man. That's a really good one. And
that's a very long one as well, 4 hours.
And Querelle is sort of, that was his last film. That's from
the early 80s, actually around the same year as this movie, because I saw
Querelle as a young lad who didn't know a lot about the world, and I learned some things. I learned some things. Let's just leave it at that.
Look up that movie and see what you take that however you want. All right, here's more of the episode.
Our next movie, Pink Floyd, The Wall, is not a concert film by the British rock group Pink Floyd, but something altogether different and altogether amazing, a bombardment of music, words, and images tell a story of violence and drug addiction in the world of a musician who who's building a wall around himself, brick by brick. The hero of the movie is a rock star named Pink, and when the movie opens, his wall is all finished. He's locked himself into a hotel room and is hallucinating about his life. In this scene, he attacks the schools that tried to crush his individuality. Funny, it's just like my day school. Later, Pink becomes a rock star and grows addicted to the power he has over his fans, but he doesn't allow anyone or anything into his private life. Nobody knows him, and in this scene, deep in his tortured hallucinations, he imagines himself as an absolute dictator. That's Bob Geldof as Pink, and the other stars of this movie are off screen. They're Roger Watkins of Pink Floyd, who wrote most of the music, Gerald Scarfe, who drew the nightmarish animation.
Roger Waters, not Watkins.
This guy once made a movie called Bugsy Malone with children that was one of the most innocent musicals ever made. Now with Pink Floyd, The Wall, he's made one of the most horrifying musicals of all time. But the movie is effective. The music is strong and true. The images are like sledgehammers. And for once, the rock and roll hero isn't just a spoiled narcissist, but a real suffering image of all the despair of this nuclear age. This is a real good movie.
I liked it an awful lot, too. I liked that scene that we just showed very much. At the same time, you know how they have these records that now they make video for them and they play them on all the late night rock shows, and you see that? This movie struck me, when I didn't care for it, as just one long version of those, running almost 2 hours. The images got so repetitive that for me that the film sort of broke down. But at the same time, that central image will stay with me for an awful long time.
I'll defend the repetitive images. I think that maybe what they're doing here in this movie is trying to make a movie in a musical form. And one of the things you have in a long piece of music is a theme that's introduced and repeated, and there are variations on it.
That's nice of you, Roger.
That's what they're doing here. I think it's a real inventive film trying to do something different.
Well, that's not a bad explanation. I liked it, just not as much as you did. Next up, the movie.
I love the disses these guys give each other. It's hilarious.
Yeah, that was really good.
Yeah, well,
I think they both liked this movie way more than I did.
Oh, well, all right. So
I like it. I liked it more when I saw it for the first time after I smoked marijuana for the first time and saw it in my neighbor's basement.
Yeah, it's a movie for the young. It's a movie for the young people, and it's from a way different age. I mean, you heard Siskel say it's like these new things called music videos. I mean, he's right. It's like this movie was shot before MTV existed. I think it maybe by the time it was released, MTV had been on the air for like a month, right? This came out in 81.
Yes.
So
no, 82.
Okay, so MTV had just come out, but this was, early days. It's a different world, and this movie is, in a weird way, a very important movie to me. But I also am kind of with Gene Siskel. I think it's good and not great. Like I watched it again, a couple days ago for the first time in decades, and there was a little bit of a cringe factor. Now, granted, we both watched a shitty copy because it's not streaming anywhere. You can't even pay for it.
You can't pay good money to rent this movie in HD. There's no copy better than the DVD edition that came out in like the early 2000s or late 90s, which I do have.
Oh, okay.
And there's a documentary. There's two really good short documentaries about the movie and a commentary track. It's all very good, but a DVD is limited. Even in its like, there's a 5.1 surround version of it on there, but even that in 2022 is wanting. And
it's going to look bad on your TV. Yeah,
it's crazy weird. That Pink Floyd The Wall does not have, let alone a Blu-ray. There's of course like no 4K. I understand there's not that many of those yet, but no Blu-ray.
It's going to come event. I mean, it's shocking that it's not streaming in HD. I'm sure there must be a story there. I mean, the band famously hates one another. Roger Waters, and who is the primary force behind The Wall, is no longer a member of the band Pink Floyd, which has been dormant for years, with the exception of a single they just released as a benefit track for Ukraine. But Pink Floyd as a business entity are two other guys, Nick Mason and David Gilmour, the main dude, and they hate each other. So I mean, they diss one another on Facebook periodically. It's kind of funny to watch. So anyway, just to give you a heads up, and to give the listeners a heads up, Pink Floyd is big now still. I mean, they're a great band, but they were, at least when I was growing up, they were monsters. Just absolutely the most important band there was in the milieu where I grew up, with the possible exception of Led Zeppelin. I think you could do Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd as the Beatles and the Stones. That's how big they were, you know, when I grew up in the 80s. Even though their heyday was gone, I was way too young to see Pink Floyd The Wall in the theaters, but I was not too young to go see laser Pink Floyd at the Hayden Planetarium. I mean, that's
Have you gone to one of those Gilmore shows recently in the past few years?
I saw Gilmore's last tour in 2016 at Madison Square, and it was phenomenal.
I assumed you had.
Yeah, that was the last time he played in the U.S. and may be the last time he ever plays in the U.S. So I saw his final show at Madison Square Garden. Kind of a last-minute decision. I said, how the hell did I not buy tickets to this? I got some on StubHub, didn't pay too much, and it was just everything I wanted it to be. It was so good. So you know, laser Pink Floyd. I mean, you would go to the planetarium, lay back, they would crank up the jams and just shoot lasers on the dome. You know, that's a thing that people my age did. You know, if you can imagine.
And you weren't even taking acid.
No.
Did.
You would, like, I don't know, you would smell people, they would like get high on like the line. Like, you wouldn't smoke grass in the planetarium.
Smoke grass.
Well, whatever. We would do
using the parlance of the time.
To use the parlance of the time. But, you know, kids were high. Let's put it that way. Somehow kids were high there. It was a good time.
I loved watching the docs for this just to hear. Like, I had never known that, like, the origin of The Wall. Like, you know, like why Roger Waters wanted to write this.
It's his biography. It's about his father and all of his feelings about. Yeah, he's an interesting guy, Roger Waters.
An interesting anti-Semitic man.
Well, it's question nowadays. I don't want to get into all that, but
I know I'm just
there is an argument to be made that he much kind of like how the left in Britain can sometimes be dabble. Like Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party, a lot of people who are sensitive to anti-Semitism will say, you know, you guys, you got to chill, and they'll be like, what? And so I don't know what the answer is. Roger Waters' wife is Jewish, so I don't know what his. I don't know what he was more. Heart,
Roger Waters, from what I understand, like, yes, he's made some like silly comments about George Soros and shit, but from what I understand, like, he's just criticizing like money in politics type shit, and unfortunately, he made those connections.
He's put his foot in it a little bit. Anyway,
he's got righteous ideas in there.
I think he's probably a good guy at the end of the day. But, you know, so Floyd was just so huge, and there's sort of there are four iterations of Pink Floyd. There's the early days with Syd Barrett, where they were, you know, in the mid 60s to late 60s, they were the number one underground rock band. You know, if the Grateful Dead were the number one underground rock band in San Francisco, if the Velvet Underground were the number one in New York, their equivalent in London was Pink Floyd, even before they recorded any albums. And then in 68, Syd Barrett disappeared because he got too stoned and he flipped out. And then they had a great period where they recorded masterpieces like Dark Side of the Moon and an album before that called Metal. And
Metal, I was gonna say Metal's around then. That's one of my favorite albums.
And then they did the Live at Pompeii shtick. And then they did the after Dark Side of the Moon, they did Wish You Were Here. And then after that, Roger Waters kind of stopped being a band of four guys, and it became Roger Waters as the main figure. And then The Wall was really his. It's basically a Roger Waters solo album with a couple of exceptions, like the killer bluesy guitar solo on Another Brick in the Wall, and also the song Comfortably Numb. The best two songs on the album were David Gilmour compositions or co-compositions. And then there was the split. And then Roger Waters did solo work, which sucks and has sucked for 30 years. And then the remaining guys of Pink Floyd, one has passed away, Richard Wright. They did a few albums that were good. They weren't great, but they were good. The Division Bell, A Momentary Lapse of Reason, and they did some tours that were a big deal in the late 80s and early 90s. I was so into this stuff. So by the time I first saw The Wall, the movie, when MTV showed it, I don't know why I never rented it on VHS. Maybe my mother just didn't want to pay for it. I don't know. But MTV made like a big deal of like, you know, we're going to show The Wall. Like they pumped it up for weeks and weeks. And I was like, finally going to see it. You know, they edited the nudity out, like they blurred out the boobs, but everything else was in there. You probably don't even remember nudity being in there, but there's like one scene where the girls take their tops off.
Yeah. Don't really remember. I don't notice those things, Jordan.
Yeah, it's quick. It's quick. But so they blurred that out for MTV, but everything else was in there. So by the time I finally saw the movie, I had this record, the album, absolutely memorized. You know, I knew every moment of it. So the movie kind of was an afterthought because I played the movie in my head so much.
Yeah.
That the movie itself didn't grab me, with the exception of the animation sequences. The animation sequences are incredible. Like by the time I saw
the Fantasia, it's great.
Yeah. Oh my God. So by the time I finally saw the movie, Brett, I already had a Pink Floyd The Wall poster up.
Sure.
So like I was already, like, the movie itself was an afterthought, even though it had already been out for 4 years or whatever. By the time MTV showed it in like 87 or whatever it was. But the movie is good, but it's a little bit like, there's a little bit of like, and I disagree with what Ebert said about like how it's not just about a whiny rock star. I'm like, it kind of is.
Yeah, it kind of is.
Like, what are you complaining about? The fans love you so much that you have to hide in your hotel room. Like, give me a break.
Yeah.
Like,
So the backstory of hearing Roger complain about like why he did this, he said, you know, we were coming off our first ever big, really huge stadium tour, right? And it was this very depressing experience for him to be at those shows, because he said, you know, there were so many people there that he knew didn't see anything or hear anything at the show. They were too far back. There's too many people. There's people letting off fireworks and beating each other up and like having their own little shows. And he said, I would feel more and more isolated on tour as we went on from the people we were supposed to be entertaining. And it all culminates in a story that he's told, and I heard him tell it 2 different times in 2 different ways, where he says like there was a guy in the front row being a dick to people, and he in one story he says he spit on him, and that incident inspired him to come up with this theatrical idea of a wall separating the band from the audience. And like at first it was just like going to be on a stage and it was like a show thing, and it eventually of course morphed into more. But it's so funny that like it was just literally like, I'm gonna build a wall and put it between us and the audience.
Yeah, like what a screw you to your fans.
So funny. Like he's definitely saying like he definitely came off as like, yeah, we're too popular now and it sucks. And
he's he's a very self-important man. You know, I took a few notes kind of thinking like, Roger Waters, get a hold of yourself. So like the first thing is like there's the imagery, like he's the flashbacks about his father. Now Roger Waters' father did die in World War II. Roger Waters was like 1 year old when he never knew his father. So that's tragic.
And that made his mom domineering.
Right. So like, but I'm sure this has had lingering psychological effects. How could it not? So I'm sympathetic toward that. But there's images of like his father fighting in the trenches in Sicily with bombs exploding, to like the kids entering Nassau Coliseum to see Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, Roger, it's totally the same thing. Like, you know, going to a rock concert is the same as dying in World War II. Like, what the fuck kind of like symbolism is this? Like, and it's supposed to be like, it's the same thing. It's war, it's battle. I'm like, no, it's not. And then there's like the shtick about another brick in the wall, where it's like you go to school to conform, like you enter as a kid and you're happy, and then you put on that mask.
Monster.
You become a faceless monster, and they even have the metaphor of it going through the meat grinder. But before that, the imagery of the kids going to school is taken from Holocaust trains.
Yes.
And it's like, you know, Roger, it's not the same. It's like, no, kids going to Auschwitz is different from like going to school. Like going to school, yeah, it sucks. Teacher, leave the kids alone. Yeah, I don't want to do my math homework either, Roger Waters. But it's not the same as going to Auschwitz. Fuck you, you're a piece of shit. You know, that's kind of what I had to say during that sequence.
Yeah, no, you're getting at what like that comes off on the documentary too, where they're like really stretching things, and you're like, okay,
it's not that big of a deal. And then the other thing is like, it's so serious. So like at the end, and Siskel said in that clip that he loved, the famous scenes are when, after the character named, they call him Pink Floyd, played by Bob Geldof, he goes bananas. He's a drug addict. He shaves his eyebrows, and then he has like he goes into a coma, and his managers, including Bob Hoskins, to bring it back to the beginning of the episode,
right,
they shoot him up full of steroids, and they wake him up, and he morphs into a fascist, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of scary. And what Siskel says, like, those images will linger with me, because the rock concert becomes like a Klan rally, a Nazi rally. They're in hoods. There's like satanic fires going on.
That stuff has aged quite well.
Yeah, well, it's scary shit, but it's cool. I mean, I will say it's like cool cinema, and it looks great. But then the song "Run Like Hell" starts, and even when I was a kid, I thought this was corny as hell. So like he's screaming, he's talking about, that one looks Jewish, that one's a coon, who let this riffraff into the room, and line him up against the wall, and all this stuff, and it's eerie. And then "Run Like Hell" starts, near, thump, thump, thump. It's got a disco beat. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, all the audience, and they're doing these like kind of quasi-Nazi moves. They got their arms crossed and whatnot.
Yeah.
Then they start doing like this boogie dance. It's like straight out of Grease with John Travolta. They start doing this weird kind of move where they're like shaking their hips disco style. I'm like, wait, a minute ago, this was like terrifying Nazi imagery. And now they're all dancing like the Bee Gees. Like this does not really work. It's corny as hell. I like it because it's funny, but it's not Roger Waters, you just, and it was his project. I mean, Alan Parker directed it, but it's Roger Waters' project.
Well, that's always thing about the production, is that like those three, Alan Parker, what's the guy's name who did the art? Jerry Scarf,
Scarfay or something like this.
Yeah, Jerry Scarf did the satirical. He was a satirical cartoonist from Britain who did all the cartoons. And he thought,
animation, amazing.
Yeah, so the animation. So basically, Gerald Scarf thought he was making his thing with Roger, and then Alan Parker shows up and thinks he's making his thing. And Alan, they all fought each other and had tumultuous periods. But that's why it's funny that this movie is like like people like it, and like it was a big hit. I understand, and like it was like a big deal, and it's interesting to note that, because I think it's like it's when you hear about a movie that had a troubled production, it often doesn't turn out well. So
right.
At least it turned into something that people like.
Well, listen, they were shooting Casablanca. I had no idea what the ending was going to be. That movie turned out okay.
That's true. I mean, is this movie where the definition of putting up walls as a metaphor came?
Well,
Roger Waters invent the wall metaphor?
I don't think Roger Waters can claim ownership of that, but certainly popularized it with people who only from anyone who's 14 in 1979 maybe thought so.
Yeah.
But I like at the end, it's like Roger Waters is such like a whiny little brat. Like at the end, he's put on trial, and the judge is he was caught red-handed showing feelings. Like that's the line. And it's like, come on, dude. It's like such like a whiny. It's just like a whiny.
It's a movie
dude.
about, I think they say it's a study of the alienation process, a movie about how the negative experiences of childhood will affect someone, make people turn inward.
It's a little whiny. The music is good.
Music's
If I were to rank my Pink Floyd albums, it's not my number one, but there's some bangers on there for sure. I loved it when I was 14. I thought it was very deep, very meaningful. I would, sit in the dark and listen to it over and over again and really connect. So when you're kind of feeling having a lonely night, it's good for you. And when I eventually did watch the movie, it was for me anyhow. So I finally saw it, like I said, when MTV showed it, 86, 87, maybe as late as 88. I don't know. Let's say 87. It was at a time when I was really getting into a lot of other British things of the period. I was a little bit obsessed with A Clockwork Orange, a movie I was probably too young to watch, but somehow I taped that off of like Cinemax and watched that one a lot. Probably shouldn't have. It's got a lot of violence and sex, and it's a little bit of a screwed up movie. And I was also really into Monty Python. And even though that's comedy, it was like British of the era. So to me, these three movies were all sort of a, these three things were sort of all connected. So it was a big deal to me when I was very young. And so watching it again a couple days ago brought back a lot of old memories, but it made me, I did think to myself, This movie is not as good as I remember. Now, maybe if I saw a nice clean HD version, I would think otherwise. But I was just like,
you need to watch it with the sound system that like hurts my ears.
Yeah. I was like, this kind of stupid. Like, what is this babbling about? Like, I thought it was so deep when I was young.
Yeah,
but it was innovative as hell. I mean, there's almost no dialogue. It's all, and it's not singing and dancing
one
either.
line that Pink says that's not a lyric from a song.
Yeah,
it's
like Bob Geldof is not really acting. He's kind of like, well, I guess he's acting. He's silent movie acting. He's not in scenes.
So the original screenplay, actually, before Parker got involved, when Roger was writing it, it was structured like Pink Floyd it all took place during a Pink Floyd rock and roll show.
Sure, I could totally see that.
And Alan Parker said no footage of the band playing in the movie, and then they scrapped that
Yeah.
whole idea. They experimented with elements from the stage show, like having giant inflatables, like of the teacher and stuff, and that didn't work.
Yeah.
They wrote a scene of this really sounded visceral and hard. Like they wrote a scene of a stadium being bombed, and as the crowd's being bombed to bits, they're like applauding. And I was like,
kind of wild.
that's wild imagery. Fun fact is that they, it premiered at Cannes at like midnight out of competition, and the production company brought the band's like gig speakers, like the speakers they use at gigs, and placed them behind the screen.
Jesus.
And like blew people's fucking faces off with the sound.
That's awesome.
It is. And that same guy said they would go around to theaters in LA and London and all the big cities and like make sure when the wall came out that the theaters they installed subwoofers in all those theaters that didn't have them.
That's cool.
So that is cool too. It was originally released in 70mm, by the way, which I would love to see.
Yeah,
I'd go see this in 70.
Let me tell you something. If tomorrow the Moving Image Museum here in New York or one of the other great theaters was showing it in 70, even though I don't like the movie that much, I'd buy a ticket immediately because I've never seen it. I've only seen it on MTV. and now, on VHS and now on a shitty Vimeo.
The same quality of the VHS, probably.
Right. Yeah.
And Waters, in like a 2000 or so interview, said the movie's deeply flawed to him because it doesn't have any laughs, and humor is a big part of his life. And he said, like his old screenplay, he's like, I'm not blaming anybody, but there was a one part where this was much funnier. I'm like, okay, I get why that wouldn't be in there for what you ended up making. It's not a funny movie.
When Pink Floyd was a band of 4 very creative people, he was great. Roger Waters wrote great songs, but ever since there was the schism in the late 80s, he's done nothing but garbage. I mean, he's put out a few solo albums that are just bad. Radio Chaos. Listen to Radio Chaos if you want to laugh, or The Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking, just awful. Whereas David Gilmour's solo work is good. It's not Wish You Were Here, it's not metal, it's not Dark Side of the Moon, but it's pretty damn good.
There was a Hey You section in the movie that was cut.
Yeah, that song's
too long.
Yeah, that's a great song, right? So, and the other thing is the best thing about Pink Floyd The Wall is the animation. So great.
Which, if Jerry Scarf had his way, the whole movie would have been animated. That's what his plan was.
I mean, it would have taken.
He was mad at everybody.
I mean, the production would have taken 10 years, but it's beautiful, hand drawn, surreal. I don't even know how to describe it. Like Bill Plimpton, does the surreal where the lines change, but like there's the famous. The best sequence is on the album, the Pink Floyd album. It's called "Empty Spaces," and it starts off like it's him and his wife are making love in the movie, and then it becomes 2 flowers, and they like dance around, and then they impregnate the flower, and then it becomes a bird, and the bird becomes a bomber. In the movie, it's a different version of the song. It was an unreleased version with added lyrics. And it's got a name change for the movie. It's not called Empty Spaces. It's called something else. And it's so much better than what's on the album. It's maybe like...
Yeah, there's a handful of things. Well, they re-recorded everything, but there's a handful of them that they like expanded. But it was all the original producers of the album involved and stuff.
Yeah, so, and it's so great. Like the longer songs. So the first time I saw that, like I said, I had the Wall album memorized. So, I mean, you're right. They're like new versions, new lyrics,
and
whatever.
Like, what's his name? Bob Geldof is singing in the flesh.
He sings in the flesh, and he's not as good a singer as Roger Waters is.
No
diss to Bob Geldof. Anyway, so that new version of Empty Spaces is something that I'd kind of forgotten about until I watched it again a few days ago and was just like, mesmerized. And I watched it on YouTube 5 times in a row. I'm like, how they've cut this off the album? It's so much better, and it's just so good.
Yeah, it's not that they cut it off. It's that they re-recorded for the movie, and when they did that, they knew, to fit the movie and the scenes, they re-recorded the whole fucking thing. Yeah, and certain songs like that one got really elongated in beautiful ways. One other fun fact that I thought was interesting: there's a line in The Flesh that mentions a surrogate band, and on the original tour for this album, when they played In the Flesh, it was another band. It was a band that wasn't Pink Floyd. They were dressed like Pink Floyd, and they assumed, and the whole gag was it was Roger's attack on what he felt was the separation between the between the musicians and the audience that can happen at these huge stadium shows. So his statement was, we have a fake band that just looks like us and everyone cheers them the same.
But but that's just like spitting on your fans. He's such a prick, this guy. He's just like so condescending. Like a band that you and I like a great deal, a band called Fish out of Vermont. They are always doing gags and doing innovative things on stage, but it's like in an upbeat way that's inclusive and fun and joyous.
Roger's like, what if we all turn the other way and face the other?
You know why he's a dick? Because he's not talented. Pink Floyd was talented, and when he was a member of Pink Floyd with David Gilmour, with Nick Mason and Richard Wright, the four of them, and before that Syd Barrett, before Gilmour came after Syd Barrett, and he was part of that unit. He made brilliant music, but the minute he started doing his own shit, he fell apart, and that's why he's such a pain in the ass, because he knows that he doesn't have the goods. He's not a solo artist, and he is not a righteous man. I just said it.
He said it. Jordan said it. I think that's just about enough for this main feed episode of Roger and Me. We will finish the episode. There's still a few minutes left. They're going to talk about the dog of the week and bring out the skunk. We haven't seen the skunk. Maybe Jordan wants to see the skunk.
Yeah. I want to know what the dog of the week was. Have I seen? All right.
So we're going to play out the episode, and then we'll come back and the Patreon will start, and we'll talk about the movies we haven't discussed at length, and the dog of the week, or the stinker of the week, which was Homework, which I actually found on YouTube and watched. And there's a reason you've never heard of it. Yeah, it's not very good. Joan Collins is on the cover and is allegedly the star of it, but she sued the movie. And we'll tell you all about that on the Patreon. Here's the rest of the episode.
I'd like to introduce this little fellow here. His name is Aroma, the educated skunk, and he's been busy sniffing out the stinker of the week, the week's worst movie.
These are amazing looking animals. I thought they were black and white. That's sort of like a golden brown fur.
Never been around a skunk before?
Never before. But I have seen The Stinker this week, an insultingly bad film called Homework, a teenage sex comedy, mostly about a young man who desperately wants to lose his virginity, which he does when he meets the sex pot mother of a classmate played by Joan Collins.
The Joan Collins?
The Joan Collins from Dynasty. Unfortunately, it takes about 60 minutes before we ever see that. What's so bad about Homework, in addition to a sniggering, leering story, is that it's constructed so poorly it hardly qualifies as a movie. Characters are introduced, dropped, picked up again. A double is used for Joan Collins' one sex scene.
He's right.
The photography is so ugly and unprofessional.
Also, that was duplicitous on the production's part. She wasn't supposed to be doing a sex scene, and they pretended like she was.
So much
that's
squeak of the week. Now let's review our opinions of the major movies on this program. The Law of Good Friday is the drama about the rise and fall of a London gangster, and we both admired Bob Hoskins' great performance. We recommend you see it. We split, though, on the class of 1984, the story of punks terrorizing a high school.
That's us on
students were
on Long Good Friday.
I thought the movie had a lot of style and raw energy. Another disagreement on Lola, one of the last films by Fassbinder. I thought this film was predictable and demoralized. Gene thought it was an extraordinary portrait of a people and a nation fighting for their identity. And finally, we both recommend Pink Floyd The Wall, a violent and striking rock and roll fantasy. I admired it a lot more than Gene, though. I think it's a stunning vision of self-destruction. Gene was more reserved. He likes the film's striking images. He thought they repeated themselves too much.
Well, so much for this week. Next time at the movies, we'll be reviewing The Tempest with John Cassavetes as an
shot in the story of Queens.
Midlife crisis. Also, Yes, Giorgio.
Classic
love story featuring the film debut of opera star Luciano Pavarotti. Until then, we'll see you at the movies.
Yes, Giorgio is. Look at those snow caps and goobers.
All-time favorite movie candies at home. Goobers and snow caps too.
Goobers
for Raisinets.
Oh man!
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening and watching Roger and Me.
Yeah.
And stay tuned for the Patreon episode if you're nasty.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.